Hi, it's Pastor Chris popping in with a quick reminder that if you like this video, it would be a huge help if you could share it with your friends. That will help more people see this video and find our other videos and hear the good news of Jesus Christ and get to know our community here in DeWitt a little bit better and maybe even find a community for themselves. So thank you very much for sharing what we've made here with the people who you know and love. And now, on with the video. So way back on Christmas Eve, and for a few weeks after that, I told you that the cornerstone of our faith is that God came into the world as one of us. Among a dispossessed people in an occupied land, to parents who could not find a place to stay for the night. And I told you that if God came into the world as one of us, that meant that in Christ, God was born. God sucked in that first breath of life and let out that first cry. God got cleaned up and dabbed off. God nursed. God pooed. God got laid down to sleep. God napped and God dreamt. And over the years, God took those first wobbly steps and said those first wobbly words, made first friends and lost friends, and went through all of those things that we go through. Somewhere in there is what it means for Jesus to be fully God and fully human. To be the one in whom the most divine divinity and the most human humanity, the one in whom holiness and brokenness meet. There's this thing that was not part of my vocabulary growing up. It wasn't part of my understanding of the Christian world and the church world, but I know it was part of other people's understandings. At some point, I went to a worship service, and the pastor or the priest or whoever was at the front said, "Now let us recite the mystery of our faith." And I know that this was part of some people's regular Christian practice. I know that because last night when I said that, Marisha managed to just do it right away. Like, knew the whole thing. Some of you probably know the whole thing. Christ has died. Christ has risen. Christ will come again. It is Lent. We are hurtling inexorably towards Christ has died. And if what I said on Christmas Eve and those few weeks after is true, then that means in Christ, God will be betrayed. God will be arrested. God will be taken before the representative of empire. God will be tried. God will be sentenced. God will be abandoned by his friends. God will be stripped and beaten. God's clothes will be given away by lot. God will be crowned with a crown of thorns. God will drag the implement of his death to a hill far away. And God will be hung on a cross. God won't be able to breathe. God will let out a cry, and God will give up the ghost. And God will be laid in a tomb. The most divine divinity and the most human humanity, the holy and the broken. And a few days later, God will get up. but that is for later. Christ has died, Christ is risen, and we live in this long span, this pregnant pause before Christ comes again. There is an industry in Christ will come again. Way back in 1970, and it didn't start here, but that's a long time ago. Way back in 1970, this guy published a book. It was ghostwritten for him. See, this guy had taken, this collection of books, and he went through it, and he found all of the chapters and all of the verses and all of the phrases and all of the clauses, all of the things that he thought said, here's what it will be like when Christ comes again. Then he looked around the world and he said, there's the modern state of Israel, that matches this. There's the USSR, that matches this. There's nuclear weapons, those match this. There are natural disasters, those match this. It's coming. Christ is going to come again. No one knows the day or the hour, but we can figure out the decade, right? And Christ will come again sometime in the 1980s. This was a phenomenally popular book. Hal Lindsey, The Late Great Planet Earth. It was so popular that it was made into a movie that came out in 1980 with experts being interviewed, like a documentary. Here's how the world is going to end. Here's how Jesus is going to come back. And it was narrated by, believe it or not, Mr. Orson, I have never turned down a paycheck Wells. The book, I think, is still for sale. You can probably find the movie somewhere. Christ did not come back during the 1980s. But I get it. I get the desire to look for those signs, to find those things, because how wonderful would it be if Christ came again, really soon, and fixed everything? If Christ turned away the wicked, brought in the righteous, created a new heaven and a new earth, prepared a messianic banquet of rich foods and well-aged wines, destroyed the shroud that is cast over all people, wiped away every tear. And we have been waiting for so long. And there are so many people who look for those signs. Here's how we will know that Christ is coming again. And our parable today is one of those parables that gets read as being about Christ will come again, when the kingdom comes. But I'm not entirely sure that it's meant that way. I'm not entirely sure that Jesus is talking about sometime way off in the future, whether that was 30 years from when he was walking around, or 100 or 1,000 or 2,000 or whatever. I think it was a little bit that he was there then. Here's the bridegroom. You've been waiting, you've been searching, you've had your lamps set, you've fallen asleep, now you've woken up. Here I am, come and follow me. Don't just run off to get more oil at apparently the all-night oil shop. And I think it was a little bit about all the time. There's this problem that our readings aren't in the right order for this year. So next week you're going to get a little bit more of this, but I've got to jump ahead for a minute because there is this other parable where Jesus talks about where you will find him. Among the hungry and the thirsty and the naked, among the stranger and the sick and the imprisoned, among the least of these, who are always with us. And so if we want to look for Christ, that's where we look. He never left. He is always among the poor of the world. Whatever that means, however big a category that is. And I think sometimes that looking for those signs of Christ will come again distracts us from where Christ is now. We fall asleep and we dream of what will be someday and forget where we are right now. And that brings me to this word on the screen. If you're watching the video, you can't see it. But the word is woke. That is a word with some weight. That is a word with some history. It got its start with a blues singer called Leadbelly. See, way back in the day, there were some young black men riding the rails. They got into a scuffle with some young white men who insisted that these were white rails. They were accused of rape. They were tried. They were sentenced to death. Now, there's more to that story because there were appeals and changes and all that kind of stuff, but Leadbelly wrote a song about it. He would sing the song, and he would tell his audience, stay woke. Be aware. This is not a safe world for you. Know what is lurking in the shadows, ready to pounce. And over the years, that got taken and used and came to mean notice the injustices of the world and do something about them. Which in Christian terms is to say, be woke, notice Jesus. See where Christ is. Among the hungry and the thirsty and the naked, among the stranger and the sick and the imprisoned and everyone else. Everyone else who is standing before the powers of empire being asked to carry the implement of their death to a hill far away. Now there are those who want us to be afraid of this word, who want us to think that being woke, that being awake, that paying attention to the ways that the world is broken is a bad thing. But Christ again and again calls us to be awake. Here in this parable, he is calling us to be awake, to keep our lamps trimmed and burning, to pour out light into the world so that we can see what is happening, so that we can see where Christ is suffering, so that we can see where the kingdom needs nurturing, so that we can see what the world can be and where the party is. And later on, when Christ is praying in a garden, when God is praying in a garden, When the one in whom the most divine of divinity and the most human of humanity, the one in whom the holy and the broken meet, is praying in a garden, "Take this cup away from me." He will return to his disciples again and again, who are waiting just a little ways away, and to keep falling asleep, and maybe dreaming of what will be someday when all of the problems will be solved. And he implores them, "Stay awake. Be woke. Pay attention. Know where the injustices are. Find me. Help me. Nurture this thing that I am creating. Nurture this thing that I am calling into being, so that the world can stop being the world as it is and become the world as God intends it. A place where there is a banquet, where there are rich foods and well-aged wines, where the people gather together, where the shroud is destroyed, where tears are wiped away, where the hungry eat and the thirsty drink, where the naked are clothed and the homeless are invited in, where the stranger is welcomed, where the sick are healed, where the imprisoned are let free. It just occurred to me I don't have a good way to end this sermon, except to say that that is the call to which we are called. To be awake, to be aware, to find Christ wherever Christ might be, to serve Christ whoever Christ might be, to nurture that kingdom wherever that kingdom might be, until it blossoms and love fills the world.